There we go, we're ready. Okay.
Okay, so hi everyone, and I'm going to talk to you about the new Relationships, Sex and Health Education, or RSHE for short. And this element of the curriculum is coming into force in schools in September 2020 onwards. So I'm going to tell you first about what's changing. All primary schools in England will be required to teach relationships education. And all secondary schools in England will be required to teach relationships and sex education. It's also recommended that all primary schools have a programme of sex education which is tailored to the needs of their pupils. So you may be wondering why these changes have come in and why this part of the curriculum has been added or developed. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, the world has changed. And because of the internet, children are able to access things they don't understand or should not be seeing without having the benefit of an adult present to explain or to guide them. And because of social media, the influences children grow up with and the way they interact has changed hugely. It's very different from when we were young, from when all of you, your kind of experiences will be different from what the children, your children will experience as they grow older. So this is the images that we were talking about earlier, so if you have any children around. These are some of the images and things that children may hear. This is actually some lyrics from a Little Mix song, that's a band, which has a target audience of 7 to 13. But if you look at the lyrics, and obviously also the way that they're presenting themselves quite sexualized, they aren't very suitable for children to hear, especially without any kind of benefit of explanation or guidance. And similarly, shocking as they are, children do see images in the mold of what you can see here in front of you. So I'll just let you have a quick look at those. And I'm sure we can all agree that some of those images are absolutely not desirable or appropriate for children.
They're quite shocking, aren't they? Really?
They are, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think also, just to chip in there, Emily, sorry, is even if your child is accessing a website that you know to be child friendly, and then it's not monitored, that pop-ups can come up on those websites as well, or on those links, and these images can just flash up. So even if you do have, parental controls are really important on any devices, but it's still really important to keep an eye on what they're looking at and what they're viewing, because images do come up that are inappropriate.
Yeah, and if we're looking at the two left-hand images, the top left and the bottom left, both of those are taken from video games, which, while the children themselves may not be playing them, they may see older cousins or older siblings playing these kind of things. And some of them are 18 rated, as I'm sure you can tell from that. Not to mention that other images on this screen sort of perpetuate stereotypes in ways that may not be desirable. So all of these things children are being exposed to, in modern life. And children can be vulnerable online to things such as cyberbullying, grooming, sexting, which, if you're unclear about it, is when someone would send inappropriate pictures or words via text to someone else that are sexual in nature.
Yeah.
And pornography, unfortunately, it's very readily available on the internet. It's not always kind of filtered. So all of these things they can be vulnerable to.
And we have experienced in schools in North Kensington between colleagues of ours. We know that this happens in primary schools. So, children are very vulnerable.
Mm. And so this curriculum is going to be a safeguarding curriculum, among other things, because children can be vulnerable on and offline. And here's just a list of a few more things that, as children grow into young people, hit their teenage years, they may be vulnerable to. I'll let you just have a quick look at the list. And it's not nice to think of our children being vulnerable to those things, but of course the best thing that we can do is to arm them with education and information to be able to cope with these things as and when they may arise. So the new primary relationships education curriculum basically aims to enable children to flourish, live and learn safely in the modern world, gain the knowledge, skills and confidence to make their own positive, safe and healthy choices, safeguard and care for themselves and others, develop resilience to cope with life's ups and downs, but also to get help if they need it, and to respect themselves and others and build positive relationships. And the Church of England is also very welcoming to this curriculum and has echoed that idea that they want young people to flourish, and they would like, to them, they think that this is a very important part of growing up, so that children grow up informed about how to have healthy relationships, positive views on sex, human sexuality and sexual health. And the Department of Education also notes that this curriculum should be flexible. So it's not meant to stand still. It's meant to meet the needs of the community, of the students in any particular school. So it will allow schools to respond to local public health and community issues. And that's quite relevant at the moment, after all the things we've been through lately with the with COVID. Meet the needs of their community, and if necessary, focus on one particular aspect. It might be teaching about gangs or something that's come up that is of particular relevance. So it's a flexible curriculum. There is a new distinction which you need to be aware of, which in both our schools we haven't previously made, but it's now going to be a clear distinction. So relationships education is compulsory in primary schools now, and that can include a breadth of topics like positive relationships, healthy choices, safeguarding, being safe online, accepting difference, self-respect and respect for others. Whereas sex education is defined purely to mean learning about human reproduction, so how babies are made, and this will be taught only in Year 6. Topics such as puberty or knowing the correct terms for genitals actually come under the umbrella of relationships and health education, or they're in the science curriculum. And if you're wondering about which bits of the curriculum are compulsory, parents do not have a right to withdraw their child from relationships education and health education. Parents do have the right to request that their child be excused from sex education until 3 terms before their child's 16th birthday, but not from any elements in the science curriculum which may cover this. So I hope that's clear. And I'm just going to move on to look into the children's minds a bit and hear a bit about what they are thinking and what questions they are asking, because it's often quite illuminating to hear what children are actually thinking and what we should know about what they're thinking. So here are some real questions from some children, which I'll read to you because they're a bit unclear, some of them. So we've got, how do the sperms move? Can your eggs break? How long does your underarm hair and pubic hair grow? Like as long as the hair on your head? Do you cut it? Some really thoughtful questions here, which I thought were very valid questions. Is there other ways, or are there other ways to have a baby but without having sex? And what happens if your body doesn't work the way it's supposed to? Which I think is a really important question and shows the child has very legitimate concerns about that, and those therefore need to be addressed. And finally, one that I find quite amusing, which is, what are the signs of having your period? Also, here's a pony, which just reminds us that the children, while they may be asking these questions, are still children. So a nice little mix there. When children were asked what they remember from primary sex education as it was then, which mostly was about puberty and human reproduction, they were very vague in what they remembered, which shows that, you know, they hadn't really fully embedded the learning and they weren't fully understanding what they'd been taught. So 2 boys recalled watching a video of a man chasing a woman with a feather but couldn't remember the point of it. 1 boy recalled seeing a clip showing silhouettes of a couple having sex. They did remember learning about contraception. They didn't remember being taught anything about the emotional side of sex and relationships. And Year 7 and 8 girls, when asked, said, They remembered similarly the video with the feather. They were taught about menstruation and sanitary products. They were taught basic contraception, but said they would have liked to have known more. And they wish they had been taught more about feelings and how a relationship should feel, which I think is a good indication of what children are asking. And just going back to the idea that the curriculum is there to meet the needs of the students, of the children, the young people. When children sort of say things like that, that's them asking to be taught better, to be taught more. And at the moment, they didn't feel that they had been taught very clearly.
And they need a lot of clarification, don't they? They need and to be given the facts. And I think, you know, we know that children may have seen something on a film or somewhere else, and they'll talk about it in the playground. And if children are informed and we've given them the knowledge and the and, you know, have helped them to feel empowered, then they will know and not feel, oh, I don't really know what all that's about. And it's confusing. It can be much more confusing for them. So this is about empowering children with knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Empowering is a good word. And in terms of what children would like to change about how this topic was previously taught, or the sex education part of this whole curriculum was taught, they said things like more in-depth learning, as it's very brief. It needs to be taught to us more because a lot of students don't know anything about it. Perhaps talking more about different relationships, different kinds of relationships. An anonymous question box, maybe more lessons, because it's as important as maths and science. It sets us up for life. Again, a nice clear message from children when they were asked. There are a couple of other reasons behind changes in the curriculum, and I think it's important and interesting that we know that these things, which are things like from the age of 8, hormones begin to influence emotions and feelings. And by age 8, some girls will have begun menstruation. By age 9, some boys have begun to have wet dreams. As mentioned already in passing, sexting is commonplace and can happen as young as year 5, and does indeed has happened. Sexual bullying is something that young people often experience, unfortunately, on and offline. Primary age pupils increasingly access 18-rated games that include sexual abuse, and scenes of a completely inappropriate nature. And TV programs like Love Island and social media platforms often present people as looking very perfect physically, and are ramping up that pressure to look perfect, which is unhealthy pressure.
Yeah.
So those are many, many reasons why this curriculum is being introduced. And now moving on to yet another area, I'm going to talk about protected characteristics. Now, that means protected characteristics are enshrined in British equality law. And they are things that cannot be discriminated against on the grounds of those things. You can see here these protected characteristics written out on this tree. The ones with the yellow stars next to them are ones that perhaps would be more relevant to young people, but children and young people should know about all of these protected characteristics as being things which are protected by law and may not be discriminated against at all. So the RSHE curriculum is an opportunity as well to address issues of inequality, prejudice and stereotypes, because unfortunately it's often been proved to be the case that those perceived to be different or inferior or stigmatized are increasingly more vulnerable to harassment, bullying, and therefore to emotional and mental health risks. Sadly, even they have higher rates of suicide. And the curriculum needs to therefore challenge false norms and stereotypes and prejudices and present diversity so that pupils develop an acceptance of and value for difference. I'm just going to mention that there are 2 videos relating to this particular topic, which are really nice and are both on both schools' websites. We'll talk again at the end about where those videos can be found, but those videos are worth watching, and there's a couple more that I'll mention as well coming up. Children should be clear on their rights and the rights of others, and clear that these rights are law. So going back to those protected characteristics, they need to know about those. They should also be clear that laws, especially these kind of laws, are there to protect them and others. Another nice video, which you can watch, is an experiment that took place in Norway, just to do with gender equality in pay. So do have a look at those videos on the website. Ofsted have released quite recently, in May 2019, an equality, diversity and inclusion statement, and have stated that they will be looking for schools to show that they are trying to eliminate discrimination and advance equality of opportunity. So from that framework, from that statement, I have just taken a couple of quotes here because it's much longer than this, but I thought I would share these with you. Ofsted will be looking for the extent to which relationships among learners and staff reflect a positive and respectful culture, whether leaders, teachers and learners create an environment where bullying, peer-on-peer abuse or discrimination are not tolerated. They will be looking to see that the school is developing learners' understanding and appreciation of diversity, celebrating what we all have in common, and promoting respect for all the different protected characteristics as defined in the Equality Act of 2010. The Church of England, in their document Valuing All God's Children, which you can find again in full on the website, on the relevant school website, have said RSE or RSHE should seek to develop understanding that there are a variety of relationships and family patterns in the modern world. They also say, if any school is not educating pupils to understand the rights of all people to live freely within their sexual orientation or gender identity without discrimination, they would be failing in their duty to prepare their pupils to live in modern Britain. So, as in our schools, we believe that all pupils should see themselves and their experience and their family reflected back in their educational setting. They should see people like themselves and families like their own represented in the curriculum from the early years. A book like Different Families, Same Love, which you can see here, is really nice for that. You can see lots of different types of families represented on the front. This idea of being visible, this idea that the child feels visible, feels acknowledged, and that their experiences feel acknowledged, whatever their family background, whatever the way their family looks, whatever their race, religion, and so on, is, I think, important to bear in mind. A couple of useful books are And Tango Makes Three, which is a book based on a true story about penguins in a zoo. There were 2 male penguins who had formed a relationship and adopted a penguin egg that wasn't being looked after by its mother. And they made a nest, they looked after it till it hatched, and then formed a new family with the baby, which was called Tango, hence the title. So a really nice way to show a different type of family, and based on a true story as well. In a really sort of lovely setting. Another book is called Princess Boy, which, as you can see here, is a boy who likes to wear all different types of clothes, including dresses. And it says in this particular page, our princess boy is happy because we love him for who he is. And I think that goes back to that idea that children need to be able to feel that they can express themselves and live freely without fear of discrimination or unkindness or prejudice. A really lovely story to continue that theme of being able to express yourself the way that you would like to is Red, a Crayon Story, which is about a crayon that has a red label and says red on it, but is actually drawing blue all the time. And all the other crayons are a little bit worried about this and have all their opinions about what's wrong with this crayon. And they will go on a bit of a learning journey as to the right way to treat someone who is not, as it were, fitting the normal mold. And it's a really good message and put in a really lovely, accessible way. There is a video of that story being narrated on both websites, both school websites. So again, have a look at the website for that lovely story. In terms of rights that parents have and when they can withhold consent, can parents or carers excuse their child from, for example, LGBT inclusion? Parents do not have a right to withdraw their child from relationships education and health education, as previously mentioned. Both subjects must integrate LGBTQ+ and wider inclusion to meet pupil needs. The Church of England also points out that it is important that parents and carers understand the purpose of relationships education and what it's trying to do, that it's about modelling positive relationships and talking about them so that children understand how to form them and how to accept others' relationships, and that pupils are not withdrawn from sex education based on a misunderstanding of the subject. So that is an overview of all the reasons why this curriculum's been introduced and what it's about and what it's doing and what its role is. So how it'll look at St Thomas's and St Clement and St James is we're going to have 1 week at the beginning of every half term where at least 3 lessons of RSHE content will be taught. And each half term will focus on a different theme. And the themes will be revisited through that term in places like collective worship and prayer circles. Ellie, I think St Clement and St James are...
Yes. We're going to introduce prayer circles at St Clement St James in the autumn term. So we'll let you know more about that as we get that up and running.
Super. And the scheme of work we're going to use is from Quorum Life Foundation, which is a well-established organisation, and it has a scheme called SCARF, which stands for Safety, Caring, Achieving, Resilience and Friendship. And they have suggested some super sort of overall themes which we have taken on, and we've put them into an order which suits our schools. So we've got in Autumn 1, Me and My Relationships, all about positive relationship building, making sure children know how to behave well to each other, reminding them of those things that make a positive relationship work. In Autumn 2, we look at valuing difference. So those are those topics around acceptance, tolerance, and valuing all different kinds of people, no matter who they are. In Spring 1, we look at rights and responsibilities, which enables children to know their rights, to know human rights generally, to understand a bit about the kind of laws that are there to protect themselves and others. And also to, on the responsibility side, to enable them to think more about responsibilities they may have towards their community, to their family, to the environment, and perhaps how to look after themselves well in terms of their money and things like that. So a bit of work with, looking after money. Spring 2 is growing and changing. So that will look at how children change as they get older. So in the younger years, it will focus on what I couldn't do when I was younger that now I can do, how I've changed since I was 1 year old or 2 years old, and learning there's some scientific names for all of their body parts, including their private parts. And in the older years, we'll focus on puberty and what your body might be going through and changing, and how your feelings might be changing as you hit sort of 9, 10, 11. And in Year 6, as previously mentioned, looking at human reproduction and understanding and learning about how babies are made. In summer 1, we're looking at Being My Best, which is all about health and focusing on healthy eating, the importance of exercise, and other things that contribute to making a person healthy. It ties in well with our Healthy Schools Week as well, and our Sports Day. So there's all the theme going on there. Finally, summer 2 is Keeping Myself Safe, and that looks at all kinds of safety. So it might be safety online, e-safety, although we also teach that throughout the year in our computing lessons. Also might look at things like safety on the road, might look at fire safety or water safety. It might also look at safety in terms of just keeping themselves safe from strangers or when they're out and about, especially for those year 6s, for example, who are about to leave primary and go to secondary and maybe walking alone to school, meeting different people they don't know, and so on. So it's been carefully thought through which order we do these things in. Just to give you a very, very brief overview and idea of some of the things they might do in these lessons. In year 2, this is, I think, from Me and My Relationships. There's an activity where if someone is being left out, the year 2s will think of ways that they can help that person and build a better relationship with that person, help them so that they can perhaps integrate more. And they write that in this little box, in this jigsaw puzzle piece. In year 5, also from Me and My Relationships, is a recipe for a healthy, positive relationship. So they actually get to write down the ingredients they think go into a positive relationship and then make their cake, as it were. So say how they would make that relationship in cake form. And in year 4 and 5, there's a period quiz. This is from Growing and Changing topic, which has some really interesting just misconceptions that children may have about periods. And it's just a basic true or false quiz to just clarify which of those things are true and which are not. So by no means a big, an in-depth overview of the lessons, but it gives you some idea of the kind of activities they might be doing. Nearly finished, but this is again, not very comprehensive, but a bit of an overview of some books that would be useful, that may be useful to aid the teaching of this subject. For example, we've got books which help kids understand their emotions, like Me and My Fear. We've got Rosie Revere Engineer, which is a lovely book. I know that book, and it's all about not giving up when things are tough, so that resilience idea. And then we've got lots of books down here about identity and tackling stereotypes, including The Girl with Two Dads, The Great Big Book of Families, How to Be a Lion, which is an animal version of this kind of topic, which is a nice story. And there are many, many more, but obviously this is just a start, and we will be looking at which books. I know Miss Kelly is already thinking about which books would be good to buy in school. She may be able to put together some suggestions for parents if you want to buy ones to have at home as well. That will just, further augment the teaching of this subject. Losing my voice now. So that is the overview finished, and I think we have some time for questions now.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. I think we've got, so Nina, did you want to ask, or do you want me to read out I'll read out what Nina has. First of all, her question is, there's been a mention in the press regarding children as young as 5 being taught about masturbation under this curriculum. Is this true or tabloid hysteria? So we're looking at children under the age of 5 and thinking about what Emily has spoken about with regards to the curriculum for the younger children. We know that the children are given the right vocabulary for different parts of their body, and they're learning about friendships and how to be a good friend and having positive relationships. But is there any mention, Emily, that you know of about masturbation in this curriculum?
Not in our SCAR scheme, and I don't think we'd consider that something that we would teach at that age anyway. Yes, there is scientific names for the private parts taught from reception onwards in a very simple form, just the basic ones, but nothing like that I've ever seen.
Emily, what's the reason we're asked to teach the names of private parts so early? Because I can see for some parents that would seem quite shocking. But I think there's a reason behind this, is there not?
Absolutely. And I think the main reasons really are that if you're taught those names from an early age, then you've got ownership over your body completely. You're informed about it, and you should be, even when you're young. It can protect you should any reason for that arise. Obviously, we hope this doesn't happen to any child, but there have been, for example, cases where in a court a sexual abuse case has been brought, and the little girl in question could not name exactly where she had been touched. Because she did not know the name of any of her private parts, her body parts, and because of that, the case fell through. So it's a question of safeguarding. It's also, I think, important, on a slightly less, serious note, but still important, that children are able to use these terms before they get to the age where they could be really easily embarrassed by them. In my experience as a Year 5 teacher for the last 3 years, by the time they get to sort of spring term Year 5, they are gaining that kind of self-consciousness, awareness of their peers and embarrassment. That means that all of this topic is quite difficult for them to kind of concentrate on, really, because they're so busy with their feelings of embarrassment, and they can sort of not take it in so well, therefore. So if they've already heard these terms introduced in the younger years, recapped now and then in the intervening years, they are going to be less embarrassed because they will have just heard it already by the time they come to talk about puberty in more depth in Year 5. And I think they are less likely to sort of see the subject as forbidden or naughty or somehow very embarrassing if they're used to it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Now, we've had a couple of other questions. Ellie, do you want to pick them up?
Yeah, I think there's one parent who's strongly disagrees for children of a very young age to know about this subject, and I just thought it'd be interesting and important to clarify that she's saying that she's not happy for her daughter to know about sex from this very young age. Can we just clarify the age and year group that the child had learned about sexual reproduction? Because I'm not sure if that was, I don't know if Lan Omer has been aware of that.
So the age that children at our schools would be taught about human reproduction, so how babies are made, is going to be Year 6, and it will not happen before that time. And that is what has happened already in the last few years at our schools, I think for many years, in fact. So that is changing.
That's the bit parents have a right to withdraw their children.
Yes, it is.
And what we always do and will continue to do is make sure we invite Year 6 parents to a meeting beforehand, and we'll show you the materials that we're going to use and exactly what we're going to do, so that you can be reassured by that. I can see this is a difficult subject. I think, there's some really good intentions here, but I can also see from a parent's point of view, if you're, I can see what Yvette's raised here as well, about the fact that, she's a good mum who's working with her child at home. She's talking to him about all the right things. She doesn't want, I'm sort of interpreting Yvette. I'm hoping I'm doing a reasonable job here, but, she feels that maybe the school might undo some of that good work, and that, it could be quite damaging. I think we'd need to be very sensitive to that. And I really want to think about that, what you're saying, Yvette, and maybe have a conversation with you about it, because I can see, sorry about the cat, I can see that that's, quite important and difficult. And we would need to sort of be really clear with you, I think, about what was being discussed. For me,
that's important, isn't it?
Parents need to know what we're talking about so that you can talk to your children at home. For me, that feels really, really, really important. And, I'd rather tip you off beforehand about what's coming up so that you're able to make some informed decisions about what you want to do. I think that's more helpful.
I think communication is absolutely key, and it's not going to stop here. It's just going to continue. It must do.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, isn't it? That we need to just remember that, as parents are the main educators of their children, but as educators and parents, we need to stay connected and informed, don't we? And I like the term that you used, Emily, was about preparing our children for life, really. And I think if you look at this, the SCARF topics, and look at what they're actually addressing for the different year groups and for the different developmental stages of children, I feel that we'll be able to deliver this really well. But of course, you know, in year 6, parents do have that right to withdraw their children, and that is what that's what the government have said, isn't it? So
yeah, I can see that you know, some of this stuff is really important and really straightforward and really helpful, and some of it's going to be more sensitive. I think one thing that we haven't touched on was well, you've touched on it, Emily, but I think just to clarify around what we mean about looking at different kinds of relationships, because we won't be talking in any kind of detail about different kinds of relationships and how they work, but we will be talking that there are different kinds. Is that right, Emily? Have I?
Absolutely. So it's just about being aware that there are lots of different kinds of relationships in the world, and so that when children come across that, which they inevitably will, just because they live in the modern world, they will be able to react with the kind of respect that we all hope our children would be able to show as they grow up.
Yeah. There's a really interesting question here. Can the staying safe message be brought forward? Actually, we do a safety week in November, which we've been doing, and I think we'll continue to do that. So it won't just be that staying safe. Thank you for that, Guinevere. It won't just be we'll do it, you know, that these messages will be at one time. We'll keep visiting and keep coming up to them, but we do literally have a safety week around fire safety and road safety in November, because it seems to me that's a really good time when the nights are getting darker, and we look at bullying safety, anti-bullying as well at that point too. So I think that might be helpful.
Definitely,
that's interesting that Nina has mentioned that sex education has been taught in year 6 for many years, and yes, of course it has. I think that the way that it's going to be taught through this program is not just going to be about putting a video on and or a nurse just coming in to just go through. It will be, you know, from a trusted adult. The children's teachers will be there to deliver the curriculum and accept their questions and really have in-depth discussion and really well thought out. But yes, you're right. Sex education has been taught.
But I think there's a shift on emphasis, I think, that we want to do, which is around about good relationships. And you know that we're thinking about sex through a loving relationship, etc., rather than as a mechanical act. So I think all those things need to be brought more into the mix. And you know, about respect and how we treat each other. You know, so that's going to be more where we're coming from. I hope that's helpful. I feel like for some of you, this might be quite an exposing situation where there are so many of us on the chat. So please, you know, maybe drop us an email and we can have, you know, have just a one-to-one chat on the phone or through a meet as well, if that's more helpful. And we haven't got all the answers, but I'm certainly willing to you know, listen, research, try and make sure that we can come to some kind of place where everyone feels comfortable with what we're going to do. Yeah. Anything from anyone else right now? Well, thank you. Thank you all very, very much for coming along. And I hope to hear from any of you who have got concerns or worries. We'll look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, but please drop us a line or give us a call. You know, we want to work with you. We want to work in partnership with you. And we all want the same thing. We want our children to grow up and have safe, respectful relationships. And that's what this is all about. But thank you, Emily, for putting everything together.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant, Emily. Thank you. Oh, little thumbs up there.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care, everyone. And I hope it's, at least we've been able to do this kind of Google Meet. It's a good thing. You know, maybe we'll do some more. I think people who are working get to have some kind of opportunity to chat with us. So hopefully we can keep this going. So thank you very much, everyone. All right.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Do you know what I am going to do? Is just take a little photograph of well, so that I don't forget anything that's on the chat.
Yeah, some of the questions. It would be good to.
Really good questions there that I'd like to just hang on to. I don't want to.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, so I'll just do that. I was trying to do it before, but I couldn't do it very well.
I'll just put a message in the chat for everyone that's still there.
Yeah. Did we manage to get across the website where to go for that?
Yes, that was in the link, wasn't it? Yeah, the link's right at the top.
But it's
my computer dropped out for a while, so I was a bit frustrated.
Okay.
There in the end. Okay, nearly done. Right, there we go.
Thanks,
Right.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Right, take care, everyone. Oh, I better turn the record off. There we go.